My name is Ian Clough. I'm a senior sales director at Adomni. Keeping it quick, we are a DSP working with a lot of the brands in this room, leveraging digital out-of-home, connected TV, and ultimately soon enough being the video everywhere company. Depending on how this goes, I have a 25% chance I'm holding the same mic as Daniel Boulud, so it's already a win. But the next half hour is going to be a guaranteed awesome amount of time with us. I'm joined by three experts across a lot of different fun brands in the luxury marketing space. So first we have Kate Dalton, who I think some of you have heard from earlier today, head of brand at Aston Martin F1. To my left, Carolyn Dawkins, CMO at Yurman. And Morgane Gaubier. Did I say that right? Yeah. I am the dumb American, but director of luxury at Diageo. To annoy them, I did ask a fun fact for each one. Carolyn has a quite amazing history and career arc, now CMO Yurman, before that Estee Lauder. Her first job, however, and a fun one, is the cashier at the drive-thru for Burger King.
Burger King to luxury. What could go wrong?
And Morgane, we are getting into the celebrity competitions. Morgane shared the stage with Bono. No big deal.
I was the chosen one for a whole year on my keyboard.
And not to be outdone, but very much sticking to the Aston Martin brand, Kate has shared a car with David Beckham. All right, so you're all welcome to sit down and can jump into the very exciting subtopic called Luxury Thrives on Brand Affinity.
Ian, what about you, though?
My fun fact, Morgane and I actually shared a similar fun fact. We both did door-to-door sales in different countries. You learn a lot about people and the fact that the size of the dog is a very good indicator as to how friendly the family is going to be at times. I have quite a few others. I've seen the same band 140 plus times. Yes. Yeah. 3 nights in Albany this past weekend. So with that, if my brain's a little slow, that's why. But enough about me. Excited to talk about brand affinity and its place in the luxury realm. I think everyone here probably knows brand affinity refers to the emotional connection and loyalty that a brand has with their audience. One more story about me, actually, before I hand it over. I think of a lot of the products that we hold on to every day, but especially those in luxury. The watch that I'm wearing, I bought this watch the same day I bought my wife's engagement ring. It's the same watch I wore for my wedding day. It's what I've had a lot of my biggest life events with since then. To me, it's priceless, or depending on the buyer, it's almost priceless. But I think that's just a really good example there of what that brand and what this product that is just an object is really meaning to me. But in the luxury space, and with that being the case, brand affinity is that much more crucial and important when we think of products that can last decades, relationships that ideally last lifetimes, and also the fact that, and if we look around this room, it's a very, very crowded and competitive space at really any nice product sector. So before jumping into some of the more, I'd say, specific areas and questions around your respective backgrounds, I'd like to open it up just thinking about a few of the key traits that really drive brand affinity, namely luxury craftsmanship and heritage. Carolyn, I know this is something we spoke quickly about last week and is really near and dear to you, if you don't mind getting started.
Sure. I'm sure like many of you in the room, we've worked on multiple brands, and I think one of the beautiful things about Yurman is there is a really rich heritage story. It's a brand that was actually started by two phenomenal artists. David is a sculptor and Sybil is a painter, and their work was really acclaimed. They've worked with some of the most phenomenal mentors and artists of their time, and they accidentally fell into jewelry. That's a heritage story that's really rich, and so every time we tell a consumer that story and we bring the consumer into that world, it really matters. I think we know that consumers are looking for something to believe. This idea of really being very clear around what is your proposition in market, how is it differentiated to the next brand, and then what are those really strong reasons to believe, both from the past, but we talk a lot about how do you pay it forward, right? We can't just lean on the heritage. How does the heritage bleed into today? So that's one of the things that we're starting to do a lot more of. I've been in the organization coming up 2 years, and so my first run was really getting the brand back in terms of, the awareness and the cultural zeitgeist. And now we're coming back and starting to tell more heritage stories in a way that has a lot of entertainment threaded throughout, which is hard. But I think there's some magical things coming through. I think the second thing that is really important in luxury is you have to convince the consumer of craft. You have to convince the consumer of the quality. And I think everybody's fallen in the same trap. Let's slowly stitch the leather, or let's slowly, carve the metal. And I think we've now got to be more sophisticated in terms of how we bring craft to life for consumers. Some of the things that have worked for us this year as well is bring craft to life in today's world. So we actually did some amazing work with Diageo this year where we brought some of our master craftsmen into store events with our high potential clients, and they brought some of their master sommeliers, and we did Don Julio 1942 tasting sessions where we talked a lot about how we think about materiality and we think about craft, and the sommelier was doing the same thing. So thinking through how do you bring craft to life in creative ways, I think heritage and craftsmanship are two of the key things that we are doing a lot more of. It's very important to us.
Amazing. And Morgane, I know you have some really exciting partnership examples. We'll spend some more time on that in just a second. Kate, when I think of craftsmanship, I think the auto space and a few of the examples we have sitting in this room right here, there's really not a better comparison than that. So whether it's related to the F1 team itself or Aston Martin brand overall, I'd say same question to you. What do you really see when thinking about that type of storytelling, leveraging the heritage and the craftsmanship that goes into it?
Yeah, so obviously I'm coming from an F1 perspective. In the world of sport and F1 in particular, craftsmanship translates to innovation and expertise and technology. So there's a nice story we can translate to that. But if I think about Aston Martin F1, Aston Martin as a brand, it would be very easy for us to say we've been around for a really long time, we know what we're doing. And that's a story that's been told over and over. And to Carolyn's point, a lot of brands will fall into, the craftsmanship on this is X and Y, and that's what makes it so high quality and everything. And we can do that. But actually, if you go a little bit deeper and, there's conversations about brand affinity and brand love, it's actually what exists behind that heritage. So why did we exist years ago? And that's the story, the platform that we play with, in Aston Martin. And actually Aston Martin's story, and I spoke about this a little bit earlier, so sorry if it's repetitive for some, but is one of human endeavor. It was a brand started on a hill by two amazing founders in Buckinghamshire in the UK who just wanted to race. They had an obsession with building something that was beautiful and had the capability to win a race and be competitive. And that's our starting point. That's how we leverage our heritage story. It's about why we existed in the first place and how that continues to push our purpose now today. So it forms part of our personality and where we do a lot of our storytelling from.
Yeah, I love that. And I think going back to Daniel Blude's conversation with Jerry and something I'll probably reference a bunch today, it goes back to that why and to those core values. And being able to stick to that for your team and culture is what just keeps on driving through. Morgane, moving more towards, I'd say, bringing the idea of a lot of this craftsmanship and heritage, but to making sure that you also remain relevant in being a over a century old, many of the brands at least that you're working with, a lot of that does really focus on partnerships, whether it's partnerships with, yes, your agencies, but also partnerships with celebrities, with influencers, with creators, etc. If anybody watched a pretty well-known show, maybe not show, but event back in February, March of last year called the Oscars, there was a pretty important piece that stole the show, and that was Don Julio. I was lucky enough to be at a brand innovator event at the Diageo offices just a month ago. There was so much talk about it. The video is incredible, and it was only, I know, a couple of minutes, but it was quite some years in the making.
It was, so thank you about that. I'm not sure if anyone did see it. I cannot take the credit. It takes a village. So our amazing Don Julio cross-functional team, so brand, marketing, culture, agency partners, media, everyone got together and were part of making this really special. And so really like the goal for Don Julio was about how could they create a moment at the Oscars, and taking a little bit of a step back, actually, our brands like Don Julio and Johnny Walker have been part of the Oscars for a very long time, for many, many years. Like we've been there behind the scenes on the red carpet at the events, etc. And it felt like we had an opportunity because it almost was like all of the stars aligned. So Jimmy Kimmel, who is a friendly of ours, who we've been working with for over 13 years, is the Oscar host. His wife is the exec producer. We really have a great relationship with Disney. Everything was coming together. On top of that, we were planning on launching the Don Julio 1942 minis. And so we're like, how can we create something that feels organic, that's in the show, that doesn't feel like a commercial, and that will be the next day, that in the same breath of who won, Best Actor, who won Best Actress, did you see Don Julio? That was what we were going for. And so for those of you who may have missed it, Guillermo interrupted Jimmy Kimmel to toast Coleman Domingo, also friendly, who was up for an Oscar. And he's like, here I am, I'm going to toast Coleman. And then everyone came with their little minis of Don Julio 1942. And you would think, how did you get everyone's permission in the audience, all these actors and actresses, to say yes to do this? And we didn't have to, because we'd already been part of the fabric for so many years. It just felt a natural piece. And after that toasting moment, to really land it with consumers at home, we did our new 60-second spot, which was really great. The results were fantastic. We had 3.9 billion impressions, over 710,000 social impressions. We have, it got shared multiple times. Our website, which was up week on week, 1,100% at the 9 p.m. time slot. There were so many little factors that was successful, and that 1942 mini is now the #1 selling SKU of that format and has had a phenomenal impact from a halo to Don Julio 1942. So all of that for being in culture and really trying to cement ourselves as the iconic celebration brand.
And again, 2 minutes that stole the entire show on Hollywood's biggest night. Highly recommend watching it. As an Office fanatic, I would say my favorite part was probably when Guillermo messed up John Krasinski, or Jim from The Office's name. So that was some really good humor right there as well. So continuing this theme of partnerships, the importance of working with collaborators and really continuing to push the envelope. Okay, I think for a lot of us who may not be as familiar with F1 or racing in general, one thing we'll still all be very familiar with is logos everywhere. You have a lot of brand partners, Cognizant, Aramco, and Boss, and quite a few others. But beyond just slapping a logo on a car, to put it lightly, how else are you working with those partners today?
Yeah, it's really varied. I mean, I've been in the sport coming up to 4 years, and when I entered into it, I had no knowledge of, I guess, how complex the world of sponsorship is. Lots of people don't realize, but F1 teams, they operate almost like turnkey marketing solutions for brands. So that is the way we're set up. For instance, in my team, I've got strategists, creative strategists, between brand strategy and then design and what have you, then marketing is a whole other team. And we work with our partners like an agency would to bring them on board, find the synergies, the narratives between us, figure out a campaign message, a platform, and then understand who they're targeting, what they want to achieve, and then try and make that happen with our platform. And that's something I just had no idea was the dynamic before I entered into it. So that's been eye-opening. So there's that side of it. But I guess in terms of everything that we do with partners, yes, years ago, very much logo slapping. And that's kind of part of the allure at the same time. The logos look amazing on the car, and to be part of that community and feel part of it was great. But actually, there's so much noise. And to try and cut through with your little logo, wherever it's placed or whatever you've been able to achieve that year with the team is hard. So you've got to layer it up. So in terms of how we work with partners, there's a few different ways. And I would say the most prevalent ways fit between kind of two areas. So the category of tech is massive. Of course, and there's natural synergy there. If you're a tech company, F1 is a prototype business. And what we find there is tech partners really want to come to us and look at how they can integrate their technology into what we do. So they have a case study to say, we power an F1 team to go faster. We power the most kind of advanced sports competitive team to do better year on year. So they want to extract that case study, using it as a conversation point for their clients and so on. And then the other side, and what we're seeing so much more in consumer brands too, and it's the same for tech brands, but perhaps in a different way, is that, we're talking about brand affinity here and finding emotion. And I used to work at consumer brands for many years in luxury fashion, and our whole MO was to find emotional connection. And there is nowhere you will find it more in abundance than sport. And also in F1, that overlap of people who are so committed. It's a very much a commitment sport. If you follow it, you're watching from Thursday, the media day, up to Sunday. And if you're living in the States, you're waking up at all hours to do it. You have different variables of fans, for sure, different levels of fans, but it really is a commitment. There's a lot of loyalty there. So a lot of consumer brands and tech brands and various industries come to us because they then have a natural kind of step in. So like for software, for instance, marketing, on Google, and you get a C-suite looking up kind of software that you do and seeing you among a bunch of competitors, what's the differentiator? But when they see you beside their favorite team or beside a brand they really aspire to, immediately that's a connection. So that's where they come to us. And what we do there is help them tell their stories in a really authentic way. So, if you're a luxury brand, for instance, they're about being considered, being very desirable, being the elite of kind of something that you don't know that you want, something you don't really need, but you necessarily want. Bring that into Formula One and you can amplify it, because that's the environment we operate in. It's something that not everyone can touch, not everyone can have. So, it's very different, but I would say working in marketing there for the last 4 years, and I've seen it change. Every single partner's brief is different, and we have options to serve us all, whether it's a pure tech integration, whether they want to use it for events and experience, there's options.
I think beyond F1, we did a bit of work with NBA this year, and I think one of the key things, it's what you're saying, and to extend on that, there's multiple ways to use sport based on different objectives, and then there's different ways in on the platforms as well. So an example for us, we have a really big men's business, and it's a high growth business, yet not a lot of men know that there is jewelry for them and that we are the brand for them. So we really used it, to fuel awareness, but then also to fuel consideration, right? On the luxury side, you generally will use influencers or content creators to start to tell those consideration stories. They don't exist for men. There really is no world where there's influencers that have any scale for men. That's where sport comes in. So we partnered with 7 phenomenal NBA talents in areas that really were over-indexed, where our store DMAs were over-indexed for men. And so we used that talent to craft a really impactful mini campaign that sat underneath our macro campaigns to tell certain product stories in partnership with those men. So the men were partnered with specific product that they had greater affinity to. And then we told stories that were relevant to that male NBA talent and to the brand. And it was really, really powerful in a number of different places. But we also were able to use it for different activations with different retailers. So we were able to create exclusive content with Neiman Marcus, etc. So there's different ways in, different objectives. I think the other thing to think about with sport as well is that we came in partnering with talent. You can go in at the talent level, the team level, or the industry level, so NBA in general. And there's pros and cons either way, but I think it's a really interesting platform depending on your objectives.
Well said. I was just going to ask about the NBA and Michael B. Jordan as well. So very cool entrance. I think it's not something you're too familiar to seeing as a historically women's notable brand, now partnering with 7+ NBA players. And Kate, I think just speaking of your emotional connection to sport, it's obviously very true. I just, a PSA, if you or any of your friends are Yankees fans, please reach out to them, give them a hug. It's been a really rough few days and nights, so just keep them by your side. Now, we've about 10 minutes left. So far we discussed both bridging the history of craftsmanship and also some, I'd say, more innovative strategies through partnership. But now is actually how we take these campaigns and the tactics we use to get them out to the masses. So my question for you, thinking back to something that's a bit more brand affinity specific is this an omni-channel approach? Are there, and I'd say this is fairly open to the panel, but is it an omni-channel approach, or do you really see certain channels? Is it social media? Is it just digital, broadcast, linear, et cetera, where you're finding the most success, and that's what strategy you have in mind as you start to think of who you're going to partner with and what you're going to say? And that's open to the audience.
Go
The
quickly.
three of you.
From my side, we very much take an omni-channel approach, but there's some channels that we invest in much more significantly. Definitely we found, I think this is a trend too with luxury brands, that you kind of need to break the fourth wall and talk to your consumer directly now. And for us, we're trying to build our fan base, and they need that. So social media is, for now anyway, absolutely the most important tool for us to do that. As I mentioned earlier, we focus a lot on TikTok because that's where we're seeing a lot of the F1 subcultures operating and really communicating with each other and finding their own community. And we're just looking to continue to fuel that narrative and be the team that shows up for them. But then I would also say, in terms of the B2B aspect, we have a responsibility to our partners, and it's a huge part of our marketing efforts to put their brand in front of the right people. So all of our channel strategies are tailored for that reason. And experience, where Aston Martin is always going to be important to us. You're sitting in an amazing experience center here. That is something that is very unique to us and has always been really part of our brand. So in terms of very important channel going forward, that's also another.
I think it goes back to your objective and what you're trying to achieve. So I do think it's an omni-channel approach. Our consumers live in an omni-channel world. They are online, offline. I look after our luxury portfolio, so it's our private client business. So the high-end whiskeys, entry level is $1,000, but very quickly it's $5,000, $10,000, $50,000. And so you might think like, well, would you do any paid media behind that? I did for one of our whiskeys that was going at $50,000, but that was because I felt that there was a different story to tell and there was an opportunity to reach a different audience. So with that whiskey, we had like a custom algorithm. And so I was like, oh, we've always been wanting to try and tap into the tech and VC community. This is something that we could do that, because there was a component of, from a whiskey perspective, it was a silent distillery that had just reopened, Port Ellen. If you're a whiskey geek, you'll know Port Ellen. But then it was like a beautiful designed bottle. So there was like a piece that for people who were into art that they could appreciate it. And then with the algorithm, there was a piece around tech. And so there was so many different layers that you could then appreciate it, that my goal at that point was more around reach and using this as an opportunity to showcase how innovative that we are, versus in other cases it can be very much behind closed doors. It's a private dinner, it's very intimate, and these people don't want to be on social or anything like that. So I think it just comes back to your objective and what you're trying to achieve.
If you ever need extra support in the private dinners, I'm around. Carolyn, I actually had a
Do you want me to add to it? Yeah. Or you want to ask me something else?
I had a new one.
Let's go.
But CMO of David Yurman, you're leading so much change, so it's really the multi-million-dollar question, or multi-million-dollar question. How are you measuring brand affinity?
I mean, the measurement. I mean, it's the most challenging thing, but I think you just said it before, right? It depends on some of the objectives. I think there's a number of different ways that we're looking at it, and I think you've got to be laser focused based on different phases that the brand is at, right? I came in, and the biggest objective I had, I could see it like it was written all over the walls, brand awareness. If I didn't get the brand awareness moving and I didn't talk to more consumers, every other metric wasn't going to matter. So that was really the key focus. How can I get more people to pay more attention to my brand at the most efficient rate? I had to leverage paid and earned media much harder than the team was before, and I had to really land it with key products so that I was starting to get a knock-on effect with sales pretty quickly. So I think that was kind of phase one. I think the next thing, obviously, now is how do I start to shift that consideration cycle, and then some of the key attributes underneath that. So they're the kind of key phases. I also run our end-to-end e-com business, so I'm knee-deep in the ROI and the conversion and the efficiency every single day. So I look at the whole funnel constantly. I don't think there's any one way. I think measurement is so fluid but you've got to be constantly leaning into a couple of key North Stars. And I think being in partnership with the CFO, I think really matters. I think one of the other things that we wrestle with in the luxury space, I'm sure you guys feel the same. I grew up in CPG and I spent a long time at Google, right, where the transformation into tech and digital was so much faster. And I came in and there was so much legacy luxury thinking, right? It's very static media, which is a nightmare to measure and to read. And it's also not where consumers are engaging. And so that's been part of the journey. But what's funny, though, we're seeing now is that as digital continues to suck up all of our attention, we're starting to see flickbacks into some of that static media. So, for example, my out-of-home crushes it with men. Like, I get so much more efficiency off my out-of-home with men than I do off social. So there's so much nuance. And so I think really leaning into that nuance based on your audiences and your objectives matters as well.
Really, really informative. Thank you. And just in the last few minutes, I think we have about 5 or so. We've talked a lot about what we're currently doing. Now it's being about forward thinking. And the 2 key words I'm sure you always associate to luxury marketing is artificial intelligence. I'm sure you haven't heard this brought up at any recent summits. But I think in terms of what I've learned about your respective companies, there's some really cool stuff being done. Carolyn, you, around this time last year, were the CMO of the week for Brand Innovators, and you mentioned a lot of what you were doing in terms of Gen AI and just measuring results. It's been a year. It's been a big year for AI. Can you just spend a couple of seconds on what you've seen change or maybe what you've learned?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think about with technology transformation is what problems do I have to solve? So one of the key things when I first came in, and I think we experience it all the time, is I grew up in a landscape where you tested advertising pretty heavily, whether it was consumer-facing, whether it was on platform, whether it was A/B. Luxury was not, my experience of luxury is they were not doing that a lot. And I used to see that at Google as well. So one of the things we do a lot now is we run all of our content, even social content, through AI systems that predict, based on the different KPI that we're going after, how efficient it's going to be in achieving that KPI and where the problems are. So we do this for every single campaign asset. We do it for different social assets. It's really efficient because you're not touching the consumer constantly. And remember that sort of consumer research, it's slow. What consumers say they're going to do, they don't generally do. So we're getting some great results there. Another place that we're testing AI right now is when you're online, it's really hard to understand how a product looks on you, what the right sizing is, whether the diameter and or just the sheer width. So we're testing one of the first ever augmented reality tools that is based on AI that can actually measure your wrist or your finger and predict the exact size for you and then show you it in combination with what you're already wearing or product that you can pull from our portfolio. And what we're seeing in terms of the conversion rate, so the add to cart and the conversion, is phenomenal. I grew up in skincare for a while, and so as soon as you can predict someone's skin concerns and you can show them the right solution and you can show them the solution on their skin, our conversion rates just flew through the roof. So these are a couple of examples that we're testing. But I find that when you're trying to solve a problem, we've had a lot of success with it, so we'll continue to push down that road.
I've been told we have one more question that we can ask. Morgane or Kate, either preference on who wants it?
What's the question?
Yours was pretty much all about everything I see with Diageo and AI on Google says that they're leading the charge on anything in the competitive spirit space. So I'd love to learn more about that. And if you'd like to answer that, I just want to give a quick shout out to Kate's team on the very recent launch of AI.Lonzo, really named after your, I'd say, leading driver, Fernando Alonso. Definitely something to check out and engage with. But I think Morgane, feel free.
Okay, very good. So we've been doing a lot in AI over the past few years. We've been exploring, we have a breakthrough innovation team. We've been exploring different tech. And from what we have from What's Your Whiskey, which is a company that uses AI and a combination of our experts to really look at if I know you ask like a few, like seven to 10 different questions, and then afterwards they'll spit out and say, you are an 84% match for Lagavulin 16-year-old. And then it just kind of removes that jeopardy of like, I'm spending a significant amount on a bottle. Will I even like it? So that's one piece. And then most recently, we did this at Johnny Walker's brand home in Scotland in Princes Street, where we partnered with a local Scottish artist. He's a landscape artist, and we used generative AI to then allow people to customize and co-create their own bespoke bottle with just answering a few questions. And then what it would do is print out the label, and it would have like a different landscape with different colors, time of day, different parts of Scotland. So it was really bespoke and personal to yourself, but also leveraging the artist itself. So a lot to explore, but I think that's a great example of being very luxury and personal and bespoke.
Amazing. And I know maybe not in the private client space, but for those who have the opportunity to go to Dublin and check out the Guinness brand home, a lot of cool AI from a customer experience standpoint being used there. But I want to thank everyone here for listening, and most importantly, thank Morgane, Kate, and Carolyn for their time today.